2024 is going to be the year of self-serve frozen yogurt and down-the-line pizza concepts. Coming up next. That was a joke, of course. However, Brent did make that advice to me before this call. So if you need to file any lawsuits, you can find him on the Fastlane/Raintree website. So find him and sue him for those bad recommendations. That wasn't me.
Unfortunately, my attorney. It's a call.
It just goes in a circle. All right, so it's an easy topic, easy theme. The top brands, the top categories for 2024. Brent, do you want to take swing one on what you think, what you'll see as positives for next year as on the opportunity front?
I think home services has had the reign since COVID, right? And I think we might see top industries and top brands deviate from that in 24. I can talk a little bit more about why in a moment, but we're already kind of seeing some indicators there that some actually really strong retail concepts might come into play. Specifically, we've got some health franchises, beverage, and a unique type of home services franchise too that's a little different to the standard model. So I think overall, Nick, we might see home services slow down a little.
Okay, that's a great answer. Charles, let's you and I give comments on what Brent said first, and then you can go next. So I agree with you, Brent. I mean, we've Charles and I worked with a brand in the carpet cleaning segment. And I'll say when we looked at launching a market, if you just search for carpet cleaning, there were 7,000 options. And when there's 7,000 options for a home service, such as carpet cleaning, and the demand isn't like bleeding through the door, then ultimately the lift becomes so much based on the individual operator than the brand category. Versus like pool service, when I had a pool, I still technically have a pool, I searched for pool service and I reached out to 15 different places and one returned my message. What's interesting about that, and I talked with my pool service guy about it, he said, I can't even keep up with the demand. So if a home service brand is going to continue to stay hot, it has to be in one where the demand and the supply have limitation. But I agree with you. I think ultimately it turned into such an easy brand type for the brokers to sell because someone comes to the table and says, here's how much money I have. And they're like, okay, this is where you fit. And the bulk of people don't have high net worth when they're buying into a franchise. So that's why a lot of the brands took off. But there's going to be a consolidation to, in my opinion, I agree with you, Brent, that there's going to be a consolidation to those that have supply and demand issues that obviously could solve from a franchise standpoint. Charles, your opinion on what Brent said?
I mean, you guys have more on the field experience, right? You're seeing these things. I mean, out of the gate, I would have said there's going to be a shift to retail from how strong service has been just on being a contraindicator. I mean, home service-based businesses have had, like as Brent points out, a tremendous run. I think there'll still be opportunities. I look at numbers for service-based brands. We're working on 2024 FDDs. I'm looking at item 19s. I'm seeing strong unit economics, but as a contraindicator, I'd say there's opportunity in retail. I find it interesting that brands like McDonald's are looking to the niche components of retail with their, I forget the name of their new brand, but they're focused on the flavored drinks. And I watch some of these smaller brands from Midwest that are focused on the soda pop / cookie / so I think retail is going to offer an advantage, not for next year, but I think a bigger trend getting to AI and more advancements in SEO. I think all service providers, including home service providers, have to worry about becoming homogenized, because does the network have stronger power than the brand, right? Or am I looking for a particular gutter cleaning company, Or am I looking for gutter cleaning, and is AI then coordinating and communicating and scheduling? And so I definitely think this could be the year of just having a nice, unique, niche retail box.
I'll give quick comments and then Brent give comments on what Charles said. But quick comment would be, Charles, I agree with you. I think technology and automation to the customer experience is critical. And if we want to look at who is the thought leader in the space, you could take DoorDash and any of the third-party delivery apps that solved it for the restaurant world. Eventually, like here it's going to happen. Like it's going to solve for the home service world as well, that you just go on and you get on demand. And to TaskRabbit or one of those is kind of getting there on allowing the independent service person the opportunity to get in front of those businesses, which means you're not going to have to be a franchise. You're just going to build up specialty, and there's going to be like the equipment around you, which is accounting and billing and all the things that these apps are already doing. It's coming. I do think the one type of home service brand that will continue to lift up is the multi-brand home service company that is basically understanding who the customer is and feeding them different things. They know that they can feed them power washing after a hard winter. They know they can feed them lawn care service during the spring. Like the ones that can look at the holistic journey of the customer start to finish and has franchise brands under that umbrella, multi-franchise brands, I think is going to be the one that lifts up. Charles, Brent, any feedback on what Charles said?
Yeah, I agree. We're talking about the threat to home services now is that in years past and prior, you would have a franchise package which would include things like marketing programs, support services, all these things that the average Jane or John couldn't really get themselves before if they wanted to start a painting franchise, for example, right? They'd have to figure that out, and most people couldn't. So you work with a franchise to get all that for you. As technology comes online here and AI comes into play, you're absolutely right. All those things could be very quickly packaged up, and we're seeing that across multiple industries where the barrier to entry for someone just to do it themselves, that common age-old, well, why would I franchise when I can just do it myself? That might become the reality for a lot of brands unless there's something truly proprietary about the product or the service that they're offering, and those brands will continue to do fine. And that's why I also think, the retail brands might have a strong comeback next year. That experiential offering that they have that can't be replicated by a bot or by code, they might be able to thrive a little bit more too. So I agree entirely.
Yeah. I think the biggest, and I'll give my opinion on 2024 in a second, but I think the biggest negative to franchising and what we're talking about is there are 1 million people that will sell franchisees these types of franchises without thinking about the long-term effect and impact it could potentially have to these people. So you have all these people that are buying into these home service brands because that's what they can afford, and maybe they're replacing their income to some extent, but they're signing a 10-year agreement that locks them in, that when turbulence happens, those brands be better show what are we going to do if turbulence happens. I think the biggest potential threat to franchising is overselling these brands where the person that's going to get hurt the most is not the franchisor that goes and exits their business for millions of dollars. It's going to be these franchisees who absolutely invested their life savings into these businesses, hoping for a dream because some consultant coached them on how great this dream is going to be of owning a man in a van brand. And if it gets completely disrupted and the franchisor isn't talking about innovation or isn't thinking about what Charles is saying, then that's a big impact to human beings. My viewpoint on 2024, there's a lot of same, like the big investment education brands. You can see there's supply and demand. There's wait lists for Primrose or Goddard. Like the reality is there's wait lists. When there's wait lists, there's supply and demand. There's more school opportunities, meaning daycare. So daycare facilities are good. Pets, like when someone has $1 or they have $1 billion, they still like their pet is a part of their family. And I think for non-pet owners, you skip over understanding like that pet is the family and they care about it just like their children. And there's a massive amount of money that is available to those categories. So any brand that's thinking about education, any brand that's thinking about pet care in some way, shape, or form, I think are set up great. 24, 25, 26. It doesn't matter what the year is. Those are staples. And I do think like the insight that Charles said on McDonald's looking at a pivot, and they've done it before. They did it with McCafe. The reality is like the biggest restaurant chain in the world is DoorDash, because I can go on there and get any type of food. I can get the nicest steak in the world, or I can get, a cheap Chipotle bowl, and it'll be delivered to me. And now because they're focused on product innovation and the delivery of product, the heat stays pretty good. So the quality is constantly increasing. But the only way a restaurant brand, in my opinion, is going to lift up in this is if there's a unique positioning. Say like what's the solution on the Better Breakfast brands, where they created a model where you shut down your restaurant at 2 p.m. That is a different type of business opportunity where you can have good volumes and you can have your lifestyle as a restaurant operator. That didn't exist before those brands started having that lift. So the restaurant brands that carry true innovation back to the category of restaurants are going to be the only ones in the restaurant space that take off, unless you're a giant brand. Charles, you want to give feedback on what I said, and then Brent, you can go second.
Yeah, it goes back to everything you're saying. If you're in the C-suite of a franchise system, multi-platform, hundreds of franchisees or startup, whatever your strategy was over the past 5 years, consider it's not going to work going forward. And this applies for all of us, all service-based businesses. And this has to do with how you manage that technology challenge, how you create that personal experience, right? And then I'll say something that sounds cliche and 10 years old, but no one's really connected with it. And there is a new innovation, is you need to know how to better engage on social. And it's not just, let me just hire our social media or marketing director and post, stupid posts on social media. I mean, these are real connections with fluid sales transactions, purchasing transactions. I mean, like you're seeing, I think even for service-based brands, if you're in the C-suite, you need to figure out how to become e-commerce experts, right? And if you're not doing that and you're just making the box a little better on here's our new version of our logo and here's our other stupidity, you're going to get blockbuster.
Yeah, I agree, Charles. And I think, look, I'm glad you brought up home services too. I don't want to badmouth it and say it's going to slow down terribly. Let me give you some vantage points from the industries that we're looking at here that we think might move. Back to the home services, my partner and I invested in 10 territories of one that starts January 1st this coming year, right? So we still see the demand there for something that's proprietary, that doesn't have a lot of competition. We think it's a good investment. That being said, I think that, let's talk about it from the franchisee side. If you're looking, what industry should I invest in? Should I do the same? It always comes back to skill sets and passion. Does it fit with one of those? But in terms of segments that we're seeing move and industries in demand, funnily enough, across Raintree, the franchise sales organization that I'm involved with, and Franchise Fastlane, both of them, I think we sold collectively, mostly them, but collectively 2,500 territories this past year. The top two brands from each of those organizations, even though Franchise Fastlane is pretty heavily dominated by home services brands, the top brands on the Fastlane side was a retail men's health franchise, followed by a donut franchise. Nothing to do with home services. They were the top 1 and 2. At Raintree too, we had some home services franchises, probably 50% of our portfolio. Our top 2 brands that were in demand for franchise sales and growth were a brewery franchise and a healthy food franchise. So, what we're looking at right now in some of the indicators are there's demand coming back for that. These franchisees are being very successful, and there's demand because the success of those franchisees is getting into the candidates, and they're hearing about the success that they're having, and that's what makes them sell more, by the way. So I think that, overall, yeah, Nick, you're right. In an environment where we are a little unsure about the economy, and we may still be a little unsure coming into 2024, it's always a safe bet. Kids, pets, and your home. They're always places where people will invest money. But I think what we're seeing are folks look a little further down the line now, coming out of, what's been since 2020, thinking, all right, how do I get involved in something a little earlier that has a little more upside. And we're seeing health-related franchises be a big part of that. And certainly back into some really smart retail concepts as competition drops off there and better concepts move in and take their places. So a little deviation there for you, but just some insight into what we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything the two of you are saying, clearly. I will say it'll be interesting to see a shift in how franchisees are built and created. And I don't know if that shift happens in the next year. For instance, there's discussion in California about disclosing broker commissions within an FDD. The reality is, if you're going to work with a broker or consultant, the question that the buyer tends to ask is, how much do you get paid, or how do you get paid in this process? And the answer goes, well, you don't pay me anything. The franchisor pays me. Well, that's the wrong question that's being asked. It's how much does the franchisor pay you, and where does that come from? And the reality is, it comes from a franchise fee that has skyrocketed. I'm good with franchise fees skyrocketing and for brands to get astronomical growth if the viability of the business is sound and the protection of the franchisee is rich. That ultimately, if I'm going to pay more in a franchise fee, either disclose to me that it's for the franchise acquisition, or really use those funds, that capital, to support me and make me successful. So if I'm a franchise buyer, my recommendation as you head into 2024, you consider buying a franchise, is lift up the level of education. Don't get enamored with the shiny lights. Look at the category, make sure it's been around. And the ones that we've talked about have been around forever. Pool service been around forever. Men's health has actually been around forever, just hitting a retail concept in a different way. There's new brands that are popping up. Be cautionary on a new brand. In my opinion, be able to invest in multiple of them if you're going to do it. Don't risk your life savings on one unit. But if you're going to head into 2024, make the decision to buy a franchise, the three tools that I think are most important are your head, your heart, and your gut. And if you rely on those and really listen to them and stay in tune, then buying a franchise next year could totally make sense for so many people, because there's going to be a turbulence in the economy, which is going to force layoffs. And there's going to be turbulence in the economy because of the election year. Naturally, that happens every election year. It will be a good time to buy. Brent, final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it. It's obviously, I don't think we'll see a recession next year, which will change kind of some of these top segments to look at. Again, it opens up some segments that might seem a little riskier, that I think might be good investments, or a little less things that we've talked about: haircuts, pets, kids, etc. But Nick, you're absolutely right. It does look like it's going to get a little choppy coming into 2024, and folks are going to be let go. And I think that if you're one of those folks that are being let go and you're disillusioned with corporate America, look at franchises. But I just want to underscore what Nick said. The number one reason people fail as franchisees is not because the support wasn't there, not because there was too much competition. It's because the franchisee ran out of capital. And that's the biggest message I think that needs to get home: is do it. If you're fed up, it's a great option for a lot of people, but don't kid yourself on how much it's actually going to cost to get the business open and then keep it funded for a year or so.
Charles?
Yeah, look, the more I'm involved in franchising, the more I'm a believer in its value. So I had a conversation with a lawyer who's not in the franchise industry. I was running something by him, and I said, and I was talking about a franchisee, and he's like, and what, did they lose all their money? I'm like, no, they made the best deal ever. It was an area representative. They're actually getting residuals, and the franchisor has gone above and beyond, but they're not recognizing the value. So to both of your points, you're accountable even if you buy a franchise. But I do think there's tremendous opportunity. With that opportunity, there's going to be some exceptional advantages to the right franchise. Doesn't have to be the biggest one in the industry. It just has to be in the right segment and a good fit for you that matches your capitalization and what you're going to invest long term, right? You're just not buying that franchise on day one. Just keep in mind, what's your budget, what's your capital for marketing over the next 2 years. But look, I think it's a year to go build assets because the economy is bullshit and you need to build tangible things.
Well, that's the bigger thing. Like, I think people are going to have to decide, it's perfectly fine. Do you want a career where you're in a job and you move up and you hit a director level or VP level, CEO in some stance, and is that the pathway that you're carving out? Or at some point, do you want to take a swing, a more calculated swing at building a different wealth projection for you and your family? And there are plenty of people that don't make that decision. They stay in careers and have a beautiful career and are perfectly happy. If you're someone that's figuring out, like, how do I create wealth in today's world, it's through business ownership. For a long time we worked with a wealth advisor, and I said, what's the number one category of background on people that have wealth? And he said business owner. So that's where, if wealth is important to you in the financial sense, then franchising can be an excellent pathway. I'm going to post Simon's question. And Brent, you want to go first? Will we see a shift more towards owner-operator franchise model or more swing toward multi-unit, multi-brand franchisees?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a little bit of sentiment right now that's taking effect in that some brands, some consultants have potentially been selling more franchises than the person could once again have the capital to actually execute and operating on, buying into this dream a little bit more of semi-absentee. And the whole notion of semi-absentee is starting to be called into question a little bit, and I think for the right reasons. So I do think you'll see a lot more brands move to, let's start with an owner operator, buy one and prove it out, and then buy more as you go. And I think that's a good move for most brands and most buyers. There are instances where the brands move quickly. A lot of the brands that we work with, if you give that advice to a franchisee and say, just buy one, well, you sell 150, 200 singles, and then there's no territory for that person to go into too. So, but they are the exception to the rule. I think, Simon, you'll see a little bit more owner operator with plans, smart strategic plans for them to grow into multi-unit and do it that way.
Charles, anything you want to add?
No, Brent nailed it. I mean, there seems to be some industry players that for them the holy grail is positioning a investment franchise model where you buy it and it's not owner operated, but the vast majority are going to be owner operated, and the multi-unit franchisees that we see succeed are the ones that start off, maybe they bought multiple, but they're owner operators, and only years later do they become absentee.
Two quick comments. One, Brent, I agree with you. I've always said, qualify yourself financially to open up 3, sign a single unit agreement. What I would love to see happen is franchisors say, we know you have the money to open up 3. We're going to award you 1. We're going to give you right of first refusal on 2 more. And if you're prepared and ready to open up those 2, then great. But we're not going to lock off a territory. A long time ago, we worked with a tax preparation brand called Smart Tax. And I asked the founder, I said, how did you create this brand? I mean, it was no different than anything else. He said, I called H&R Block and I asked if I could become a franchisee. He went to some franchise seminar and he wanted Brooklyn, and they said Brooklyn sold out. And he's like, but there's only 2 locations open. And they're like, yeah, we sold the rights to 50. Well, what happens in those scenarios, if you oversell the market, then it deteriorates the opportunities for others to get in that can be very viable to you as a franchise brand. So that's where I think if the trend moves away from, and it got into 3, 5, 100 packs, because the broker community, some of them figured out, well, I could get a much higher commission if I sell a multi-unit agreement. But to the franchisee, I think it's the franchisor's responsibility to say, let's give you 1, let's prove out success, and then we'll scale. But we'll reserve the market for you just in case someone else comes in and says, do I want it? And maybe it's metric based, then you go in there. I said 2. Last thing, I do think there's going to be a movement where the semi-absentee or absentee brands are going to see a huge pop. That could be haircuts. It could be one that Brent has obviously worked with, Dog Training Elite is one where after you've gotten your unit up and running, it's a good scaling brand because you can build out a staff. Like, you're going to see brands that create scale just like that, that will cultivate a multi-unit operator that doesn't have to be the day-to-day face at the existing location, because that's the only way you're going to be able to scale. So hopefully, if someone's watching this, it's giving you guys some insights into at least our viewpoints on franchise. I think we're all in support of it. Look at it, rely on the experts, do your homework and your education. And if it doesn't work out, Charles is a great attorney. He's great at suing franchises.
No, never.